Welcome to our Managing Through Crisis Summer Series presented by MSU's Broad College of Business. My name is Marcie Stowell. I'm the Assistant Director of Executive Development at MSU. Today we're offering a session by Dr. Anjana Susarla focused on the digital transformation that's occurring quite quickly as a result of COVID-19. After her 30-minute presentation, I'll share your questions with her. So please use the Q&A feature in Zoom to submit your questions throughout the presentation. I will share as many questions as time allows with Dr. Susarla. We also have a little quiz for you partway through using the poll feature in Zoom. So please keep an eye out for a pop-up box about halfway through the presentation with a few questions for you. After we conclude today, we'll provide you a link to the recording of the webinar, which is posted on the Broad YouTube channel. There's a playlist there. And now I'd like to welcome Dr. David Freyer, the Assistant Dean of Outreach and Engagement. Dr. Freyer, thank you for being here today, and thank you for all your support of this summer series.
Well, thank you very much, Marcie, and grateful to you and the team for helping support what I think has been just a fantastic series this summer. On behalf of Dean Gupta and our entire team in the Broad College of Business, I'd like to welcome all of you here for the latest session in our Managing Through Crisis Summer Series. Very excited to have Dr. Anjana Susarla with us today. Anjana is a world-renowned expert in so many different topics, but the primary one she's going to focus on today is the issue of digital disruption and what is actually happening in so many aspects of our business. This is a topic that hits home for many of us in a lot of different ways, whether it's from a people standpoint, thinking about human resource issues, whether it's a leadership standpoint, whether it's a financial standpoint, whether it's a supply chain standpoint. And I think these are topics that are well worth a little bit of time discussing. And I think Anjana is going to do a great job helping frame what these issues are. One of the great things about digital disruption and our overall program portfolio is we cover this topic in so many different ways and so many different programs. In particular, digital disruption is really impacting supply chains across the globe. And so as you listen to Dr. Susarla's remarks today, as you think about the implications and impact of these things on your business, please feel free to connect with us. We'd love to help you and your organization advance your thinking in these areas. We'd love to have you attend one of our many supply chain, leadership, or other programs. And so thank you again for your attendance today. And Anjana, thank you so much for being here. We look forward to hearing your remarks and learning a little bit more about digital disruption.
Thank you very much for the wonderful introduction, Dave. Thank you. I'm so delighted. This is a little bit of things that I've been writing in multiple languages. So just without any further ado, let me introduce the topic. What is digital transformation? What is digital disruption? You know, there's a Chinese proverb that said, may you live in interesting times. It is not meant in, sort of interesting is not always a good thing. For better or worse, we are all living in those interesting times. And, as a famous revolutionary once remarked, there are decades where nothing happens. And then there are weeks where decades happen. So what I will try to do in this webinar is to give somewhat of a succinct overview of all the things that have been happening. I think a famous quote from Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, was that companies had to do almost 2 years worth of digital transformation efforts in just 2 months. And so I will try to put some structure around all these digital transformation and say that there are basically 3 things that have happened. One is we see a tremendous shift, which is virtualizing process. Anything that can be done face-to-face is now we are forced to do it on the computer. So what does that mean? And transforming that, there's a corresponding change in how businesses are organized. And I will talk about what's called shift from pipe to a platform-based model that's created by this transformation. There's also parallel change that has been triggered in organizational culture. I won't spend much time on it, but it's something that's happening as we see. So I think this was a quote from Satya Nadella, who's been a tremendously transformative CEO of Microsoft. You know, the company has done tremendously well under his leadership. And he said that companies have gone through 2 years worth of digital transformation in 2 months. So IBM, CEO of IBM said that basically every company in future is going to be an AI company. And, you know, again, the digital transformation has been tremendously accelerated by COVID. So can we understand what is digital transformation? Let me start with some definitions. First, when we start doing everything on the computer, the first step is what we call digitization. That means take a process and turn it into something digital. What is that? Can I give you an example of that? Yes. As it turns out, I think a few years back, Domino's introduced a pizza tracker online. So making the pizza, when you put order for the pizza, when they make the pizza, they assemble the ingredients and it gets on the delivery vehicle, and then, you know, someone brings it to your home. There are a lot of physical processes, obviously, but there's also digital process. What is the digital process? Anything that contains information can be put on the computer and we can track and monitor, right? So one of the tremendous shifts that we've seen in supply chain is when information becomes digitized. So, you know, an analog process, first step when we take it and then we can convert it to something computerized, that is the first step, what we call digitization. What does digitization do? The next step is what we can call as digitalization. Once we can take some process and make the information part of it computerized, then we can also provide, maybe we can also change something about the process. You can do some new revenue model or have new business opportunities. Again, some of these examples are old because these have been happening in businesses for a while. But McDonald's did something like process digitalization when you go to a drive-through and you place an order at the drive-through, the person taking your order is not necessarily in the McDonald's, which is actually supplying you the food, because the minute you have a phone-based interaction, you can route the call through a call center, and person can be in Hawaii or Philippines or wherever in the world, or it doesn't even have to be a real person. Maybe you're talking to an AI, artificial intelligence assisted device. So then what happens is there is an opportunity for the customer service agent who is talking to you to do some cross-selling or upselling, or maybe they can look at your previous orders. There is an opportunity for transforming the customer interaction. Instead of saying, do you want fries with that? They could probably give you, more options, or look at your past behavior, or maybe you can, there is an opportunity to reinvent the customer experience. And that is an example of digitalization, where you are transforming. When you start by digitizing a process, the next step, you can transform it to generate maybe new sources of revenue, or tie together processes, or change the way humans are interacting with the process. What is the ultimate step in this is digital transformation. Digital transformation is about doing things differently, creating new business design. It's not just automating or inserting technology into existing process, but we are going for much more. We are optimizing value chain. We are modifying the business model. We are changing essentially a new, we can even create new lines of supply of products and services and so forth. And this leads to newer and better ways to provide customer value. And we see, the companies that have been very, very successful in using IT to transform their supply chain. You could say examples such as Amazon, but also examples like Walmart. These are all been tremendously good with getting digital business transformation, where they require rationalization, simplification of business processes, and creating new business processes necessary for the new business rethinking. And I think Walmart has been a pioneer in this kind of digital transformation for almost 2 decades now. Even way back in the day, they used to do, give more power to the vendors to manage their own inventory. And they pioneered satellite-based retail link system, which links all the super centers and the stores with an IT, system and so on. So these are all examples of digital transformation. And again, one thing to emphasize is, it's not like all these ideas were not there. In my opinion, COVID is what it's done is there were already some of these shifts that have been occurring for almost maybe last 20 years. But now we have advances in computing, we have advances in AI and machine learning. So, the combination of mobile devices everywhere, AI and machine learning methods, and sudden pressure created by COVID has just meant that, tremendous range in terms of the combinative capabilities of digital transformation, right? So how do we understand how businesses have adapted to this landscape from these three, from process digitization, digitalization, and digital business transformation? What does that mean for how businesses are organized? Well, one is it creates a lot of things where processes can be done virtually. And then it also enables shift in business value. Businesses can shift from being pipe to a platform model or a prism kind of model. I will explain all that one by one. What does virtualization of processes mean, right? This is a great quote by Andrew Yang, who, said that we are experiencing so much. If you're a transportation company or grocery or big company, essentially what's happening is suddenly you see a lot more scaling up investments in things like robots and technology. So everything that can be, in bits, everything that can be information, you are seeing, a shift in businesses where we have to shift from paper or face-to-face to everything being done, by computerized processes. So then what happens? An example from teaching. In the classroom, when we are, professors lecturing to students, what you have is essentially some sort of synchronous delivery. At the same time, person is delivering and people have to participate. But when we decouple and it's done over the computer, suddenly teaching shifts. It's no longer just a lecture that is being, delivered over the computer. You can have chat rooms, you can have virtual office hours. You can also have, live and mixed. Not so much, this doesn't happen so much in a webinar, but you would see this in if it's a full semester long curriculum, right? And so what can happen is you can almost have a mix and match, and you can, we can have bites, micro-sized bites of education that can all somehow be seamlessly coupled to give you, essentially, it's almost like a Netflix type of, you can recreate that experience for teaching, teaching function or teaching vocation. So the possibilities, suddenly, this is the example of how we can take a process, digitize it, but then we can create essentially new ways of value creation or new ways of value delivery. And in the process, the function itself becomes enormously transformed, right? Of course, then what happens? Do we know what happens to social norms? Maybe we can create like some digital nudges to help participation, right? And, in the classroom, there are people who will speak and ask questions, and that helps the silent participants in the class. How do these motives work in digital spaces? Well, we are just at the beginning, but an example comes from, this is from online crowdfunding. If any of you have participated in Kickstarter or Patreon or any of those places, once you virtualize something and you're trying to do fundraising online, it's also possible to do a lot of real-time test or interventions, or almost like a A/B testing, as it's called. You can introduce new nudges, online nudges. So for example, if there are, I'm trying to raise money for my book project, through Kickstarter, what I could do is maybe in addition to get an ebook and get a hardback of the book, I can introduce what's called a decoy option. Normally no one will choose, but adding it might make the other choices look more attractive. So it's almost like in real time, I can roll out different versions of my crowdfunding pledge or campaign, and I can test which is more effective. We see a lot of this in politics, where actually when you get fundraising emails from campaign A or campaign B, they do a lot of these testing and they know which can be more effective and usually use that to deploy for the larger scale fundraising pitches, right? So what does virtualization of processes mean? The virtualization of processes also means new opportunities for companies to change the way we interact with customers, offer new options, and do more experimentation in real time, because now we have the ability to do it over the computer, right? And that leads us to, at some level, fundamentally start shifting how the company itself is organized. Because in traditional kind of business setting, you have a firm, you have an upstream suppliers, you have downstream customers, but suddenly we are decoupling things, how everything is happening in the organization, and we can essentially move these bits and bytes of information around. So then we can have new sources of supply, we have new ways of connecting with our customers, and we can bring those together also, through all the information that's created. So essentially we can even create new networked markets. So the internet can enable a lot of participatory networked interaction itself. So take, for instance, traditional TV channels, and then, what has happened with the era of YouTube. And YouTube creates millions of hours of broadcasting content apparently every day or every year. So traditional TV channels were organized in a certain way. YouTube is essentially blurring these boundaries between who is the creator and who is the viewer. And it can enable much more different ways of monetizing of content and so forth. And I don't know if we can do a poll, but maybe there's a chat window. Somebody can quickly answer this question. Do you know which is the Disney movie that's going to be released on, entirely in the streaming platform very soon? Disney had made a big announcement that they're going to be streaming on the Disney Plus, and clearly because we don't know how theaters will be in the fall, right? So there's also a lot of shifts, in organizational culture, along with I think I saw some, I saw some comment from someone saying the volume is low. Is the volume okay now? All right. So it's time for a quick quiz. Marcie, can we do the quiz? Which company reported seeing increased sales for tops but not bottoms during the coronavirus? Okay, I see the votes. Seems like Walmart. Yes, that's the correct answer. Most people went for Walmart. And which of the industries has reported seeing increased spending post-COVID? Yeah, kind of cleaning supplies. And what about the next question? Which of these methods of delivery has seen increase? Buy online, pick up in store, buy online, ship to store, neither, both? Yeah, it's kind of both actually. And of course, COVID-19. Which of these is the most important for digital transformation? Great job, everyone, attendees. Fantastic. Okay. So how have businesses adapted to these changes? I think we see three different big shifts that companies have tried to address. One is shifts in the way socializing is occurring. shifts in schooling, and shifts in shopping. So I would say 3 S's. And to understand how to deliver value to your customers, companies have had to understand these 3 big shifts. So, social distancing has changed human contact, digital immersion has accelerated, and shopping has also seen an increasing velocity for online restaurants and things like that. And quickly, I also noticed somebody answered the correct answer for Disney Plus, which is Mulan. So good job. All right. So what is, how can I understand some of these shifts in business in the last 3 months? Let me give some examples. Teledoc, this business model has seen a tremendous increase. And what does Teledoc do? Well, telemedicine. And one of the nice things I think about Teledoc, everyone who has used it has said that essentially, this is an example right there of digitization and digitalization. We don't always need a face-to-face doctor appointment, right? Airbnb, this is one of the models that has been very hard hit, obviously, by the pandemic. But they found a way to, when life gives when life gives you lemons, turn it into lemonade. So what they've done is they've retooled themselves for longer stays, right? And also they've introduced what's called online experiences. One of those online experiences, there was an article which said that, there are K-pop dance lessons being offered through Airbnb online experiences. There's laughter yoga. You can watch a cow being milked in real time, although I don't know why somebody would want to. But, if you want an experience, Airbnb has it for you, right? So what has that helped? How has that helped Airbnb? Well, as it happened, I think they've been able to weather the storm better than, for instance, Uber. And Uber itself has done a reasonable job of, they've done a lot of shift on Uber Eats. So, they've kind of transformed their value proposition from something where it's Uber transportation to, food delivery. And so the pandemic as progresses, and we still have some concerns, and people are not really traveling as much and doing things the way they used to, we'll see more of these kinds of probably new methods. There's also tremendous explosion in people live streaming, offering a lot of new content and so forth. So this is an Instagram body coach. Actually, this is a YouTube channel. And there are a lot of Instagram influencers who all of a sudden, chefs, fitness coaches, people like that, artists, they've all kind of completely retooled themselves and transformed themselves into doing live streaming and, essentially personalizing a lot of content as well, right? You see other thing, virtual concerts in online games. This is an example where they had hundreds of thousands of people attending online concerts. So some takeaways, what's happening is you see a lot of digitalization, and platform-based business models that are ascendant because of COVID. But this raises a issue of how comfortable are people living their lives essentially on Zoom or living their lives online? And does that mean there is some digital divide among different groups? A set of people who can navigate, the COVID-related digital disruption better than others. So part 3, I want to spend a few minutes talking about how companies can build resilience. Given that, we are a great school for supply chain management, I want to spend a little time talking about the supply chain implications. How do businesses retool themselves? So this is a funny slide, cartoon, funny picture. Imagine if we are doing the same thing with Google. Instead of search results, if we had to send in a postcard or, allow 30 days for search results. So obviously, things have changed tremendously where everything becomes digitized, right? So the recovery also has to be digital. And what do I mean by that? Well, first of all, one of the things that we are seeing in today's world is the customer experience needs to be very seamless. So if there's something that's happening digitally and something that's happening physically, as we see, people are comfortable more with you buy online and, sort of do curbside pickup if it's a grocery store, or, these mixed kind of models. So it's imperative for companies to understand how to integrate all the data, the unstructured data they get from text messages, maybe market data, product data, social media, blog posts, but everything has to be in sort of a seamless manner where the customer behavior has to be understood. Doesn't matter which channel, because you'll see more and more of this seamlessness. Customers are expecting sort of the same methods of the same experience everywhere, and companies need to understand their customers sort of better. And that relates to things like there are a lot of online and offline synergies and integrated channels. Pretty much every mom and pop store had to be comfortable with putting up some website, listing something on, let's say, Yelp or Google Maps, making sure they're seen and heard in the digital space. So understanding the digital footprint, understanding how it connects to the physical footprint, that's become really, really important. And alongside the e-commerce giants like Amazon, they have small retail stores, so because they want to understand the online and offline connection better too, right? So while physical stores are sort of indispensable, it's also important to enhance personalization in the store. And so companies have to understand where is this weakest link, so to speak. And this is another very interesting study that was done by McKinsey. What they said is, if you just do digitization without understanding, where your customers are coming from, who your customers are, it's not necessarily a good thing. It'll actually end up hurting your business. So we have to also pay attention. We have to digitize, but we have to digitize in a manner that we understand who our customers are and where they're coming from, right? For instance, here, one of the things that happened was that this McKinsey study looked at essentially different customer groups between online and offline for a bank. And one of the things they found was there are still people who need a lot of help when they're doing orders online or when they're doing online banking. So this is an example where the bank looked at the customer's data, and essentially what they did was found some way to figure out, which customer segment needs more live help through either some chat or a live chat with a high-skilled agent. Where do we understand who is this customer? If they're stuck in this process in the customer funnel, we want to intervene and sort of connect them with maybe a live agent. And that agent maybe is available to talk on the phone and walk the customer through different stages in their online, customer experience. And so it's very important to understand these differentiators and, sources of value for customers as well, right? And the final thing I would say is, supply chain resilience also requires understanding your supplier base. Do you want a regional concentration? Is it a small outsourcing base? What's the skill set of your your suppliers? And I think one of the things we are hearing is understand where your supply chain vulnerabilities are in the age of COVID. So how vulnerable is your planning network? How vulnerable are your transportation? Do you have financial considerations? For example, if a lot of your suppliers happen to be small and medium businesses, and they could be really adversely affected by some of the payment uncertainty and so forth. Are your components, is there a lot of complexity in your supply chain? What about the organizational maturity? So I think COVID also, digitization is mostly from the front end, what the customer sees. But on the back end, there's also a need for capabilities from a supply chain resilience and understanding supply chain vulnerabilities, right? So for example, a lot of digitization can help with better visibility. But if there are, operations personnel need to sign for stuff and they have to come to the office, right? Maybe you can use some RFID tags or cross-docking type of things. Those capabilities don't always exist. What about access to credit and liquidity? So along with digitization, it's also important to have the back-end supporting processes that can enable more resilience in your supply chain and more reinvention of supply chain roles as well, right? And so I think this is almost, I'm reaching the end of my talk, but the MIT professor, David Simchi-Levy, has pioneered this approach recent times, which is that we actually need some risk recovery indices. We need some metrics, like we need metrics that can tell us, what is the different durations, how much disruption can I handle, and how much, how can I also understand my performance impact, right? So any vulnerability in the supply chain, what's ways to measure, and it's like almost we need these stress tests for critical supply chains. So those are, some of the closing thoughts that I would like to end with. So digital transformation requires a lot of changes in workplace itself, remote work, workplace automation, online services, virtualization of processes. But along with that, we have to also understand marketing side, integrated channel, social media, and so forth. And from a supply chain, how to get resilience. So that's kind of the big picture. And I hope I tried to put it all together and say that COVID has obviously resulted in a lot of, transformations, and the digital transformations basically mean that on the one hand, there's a digital transformation in the organizations itself, but there is also corresponding marketing mix has to change, and supply chain resilience is also a very crucial aspect of how all these things, sort of work. Now I'll pause here for questions.
Thank you, Dr. Susarla. We have several questions coming in, and if you were following chat, you saw my little plea for some more questions. We have room for typically 10 or 12, and we have 9 right now. So we'll start with that and then go from there. For those of you that are listening, you are welcome to use the Q&A feature to submit a few more if you have one that you'd like us to address towards the end today. Dr. Susarla, would you please go back to slide 9?
Okay.
We had a question from a company that is upgrading their digital platform to avail processes and AI benefits. Does this fall under digital transformation?
Yeah, I would say that without more details about what the company is actually doing, I would say that, digitization is oftentimes one process changing. Digitalization is when the process is being reconfigured in some way. But if the company is fundamentally shifting something about how they are operating, I would say it is digital transformation.
An unrelated question. This question is about blockchain. Where do you see that fitting into the digital mix?
Yeah, I would say that, blockchain it can be all three, but oftentimes it's something that helps with digitization and digitalization. So I think I gave one example in the talk, which is, if you're working with some small and medium enterprises, for example, they are your suppliers, and they don't always have a lot of payment, capabilities or loan, or they don't have the sort of financial reserves that you would expect in more mature organizations. So then what you could do is, maybe if we have 3 or 4 different partners, if we use blockchain-based enforcement and some smart contracts to guarantee some payment upon, maybe partial fulfillment and things like that. So that is an example of we're taking a paper-based process, transforming it to something where it's occurring on the computer, and that computerization will also enable a blockchain-based smart contract to work on top of this, the computerized process. Does that sound good?
That
So
sounds good. That sounds like there's a lot to learn from you and from others in that whole field, how all those systems overlay.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
and oftentimes the blockchain-based enforcement can be on top of a digital process.
yeah.
So,
So if we step back a little bit and talk about business adaptation and organizations that are in this moment where we have to quickly adapt, we are in perhaps a situation where we don't have finances that we typically do, or have taken some hits to the revenue. What are some things you recommend that a smaller business or a medium-sized business do right now to deal with our current environment and then into the future as we project out a few years?
yeah, I mean, some of the examples I would say is I've seen hair salons and small gyms do this. They've tried to provide virtual workouts. They've tried to do a lot of digitization. So if they didn't have much of a website presence earlier, they've quickly gone and retooled. And so what's one of the things you can do? A fitness trainer, maybe it's not possible for you to go to the gym because we are concerned about, getting COVID and social distancing is not possible indoors. But maybe if we can have these virtual one-on-one live session with your trainer. Would you pay for that? I think, there are enough people who would. So taking any activity that used to be done again in a face-to-face setting, can we reimagine this somehow and do it, and sort of through the computer? So I think that's why I gave this example of, so many chefs started doing live shows. So what's the first step? Well, the live show is for them to build, some audience. And once they have an audience, the next step they need to monetize clearly. Because people are not going to restaurant and eating. Restaurant volumes have fallen, but maybe they will order food from where the chef operates from that restaurant. Maybe they can do delivery options, and maybe like an Airbnb type experience, the chef could probably do some kind of you know uh, a one-on-one, maybe Zoom cooking lesson, right? So there are all these possibilities. It's not easy, obviously. There's no quick um, something where I can give a one or two step, but there has been tremendous creativity in how a lot of businesses have dealt with this digital disruption by COVID. And I think these are successful examples. Small businesses, first step I would say is they have to figure out, if they're not already online, well, they have to get online. They have to find a way to be on Yelp, to be on Google Maps, where they can be found by people online, have a Facebook presence, make sure people are talking about them. So all these things are, really, really important. And then the second step is they have to understand where their customers are coming from. So Facebook gives Facebook pages for businesses, provides them with analytics. YouTube gives analytics. Google's, they can get Google Analytics account. So they need to then start getting a little bit more into those details and saying, who are the people who are watching my shows? Where are they coming from? How do they so know my customers sort of better? That should be the second step. The third step will be, let's find some way to engage and deliver value to these people who are interested in me. And that is obviously a very different mindset from, I have fitness center, if I build it, people will come.
Yeah. And as that fitness center or salon owner or other type of business owner, do you have some examples that you could recommend that there maybe are companies that have a clean, simple strategy that would make that learning curve less for them as they consider how to go online and create these strategies you're suggesting?
One of the things I would say is that people have to first understand, the basic, like Google search itself, right? So there is almost a cottage industry of people who have provided services to companies, understanding Google search. So Google actually provides what is called Google Analytics that tells if people are searching for a keyword. For example, if you are a store that sells golf equipment, if somebody is going and Googling golf equipment, and then I can, if I'm a golf shop owner that sells, sports related stuff, what I can do with my Google keyword, the Google Analytics account is I can figure out what are people searching golf related in where I live, who are my competitors, what is the, what does traffic look like to me, my website versus other websites. So there's a lot more detail. As I said, first step is having a presence online. Second step is understanding who are the people who are checking out my website and where are they coming from, how do I understand them better. And I think this would require almost, I would not be able to do all that in a 10-minute or even, 1 hour. But yes, understanding more search personalization, understanding how people interact on social media, those are all key. Right?
Thank you. And those are very good steps that someone can take and learn, or find resources online to create a strategy that will help them now in this current environment.
Yeah.
Let's shift a little bit to talking about education. That's beginning to be very top of mind, both from a K through 12 perspective, and then obviously from a higher education perspective as well. I chuckled when I saw your Google Classic search engine that took 30 days to return a result. And I remember my first thesis also was similar, right? Where you researched at the library, you went and followed arrows to the stacks of books. When we were given or able to take advantage of high power search engines, that greatly transformed many things, including higher education and industry. What areas of higher ed or employee learning do you think will be as significantly impacted now as we were when we benefited from those search engines?
Well, higher education, I have some interesting stats. I think it was said that at Harvard University, almost 20% of new admits have deferred their admissions. So that's a very incredible statistic, So it's like, is all the, should students, is like Zoom University the same as, real life college? A lot of people would, probably say that it's not. And one of the things I think me and some colleagues tried to look at MBA admission forums. And what we try to do is by analyzing what people are talking about from their conversations, all the social media posts, we almost found 5 different categories that people are interested in. And I would say 2 of those categories would be employment related. And one of those categories are people are, asking questions about admissions. They're asking, what does this school look for compared to other? But almost 2 of the categories, 40% of questions that people have about going to a college for especially a master's program, but I'm sure it's the same for undergraduate, 40% are about the experience of being in that college itself. So how does the college experience, transform itself if we are doing a lot of things, if lectures are happening, let's say on Zoom? I would say at the very minimum, universities need to find ways to maybe get people together in informal groups or find ways to retool. So yes, we can be in class, we can change the way the class itself works, but what about after class interaction? Can we find some, chat rooms or things where, private networks where people can sort of at least say hello to their classmates and get that experience of, here I hung out with people who are in the same class or same university or something like that. So
yeah, those are definitely ways that are emerging that we see as ways to keep students engaged when there's obviously so much distraction, and autonomy with the viewing of a class is engaging them throughout, so they're participating. What have you seen so far that we've learned about online learning or learning in that live interactive environment?
One of the things I think we've seen is, online learning, there are a lot of learning analytics that are being used. So in other words, what people are trying to do, the platforms that are providing learning such as Coursera and universities themselves, they have invested a lot of energy and a lot of analytics into what are things where people's attention, what are points in this lecture or points in the course, that keeps people most engaged. And also we have to figure out, I think, what makes people uninterested and sort of turn away from, the course as well. Figuring out those exit points, that's also very, very critical. So I think the consensus in online learning is, if it's rightly managed, it can actually be almost as effective as a real class. And the second thing I think we found out is we have to find those little nudges, so to speak, to intervene and make sure people don't lose interest. So that is very critical.
I like how you phrase that. We've found that now. You were the expert, of course, but we've found that already now this summer as we've done live online, that as we nudge participants, it helps increase their learning because they feel like they're still a part of the class and engaged not just with the faculty, but with those around them in the class as well. So it creates this community that you would typically get in a physical classroom.
Mm-hmm.
So now we've talked about higher ed for a minute. I would love to keep asking about that. But let's shift to talking about working from home or working from anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that is here to stay? And part two, what are the implications for offices in the future?
Yeah, there are a lot of interesting statistics on the working from home as well. I know that some companies, I don't know if it's Facebook or somebody else, they've said that, through 2022, we are okay with companies, or 2021. And in some companies, I've tried to say that it's almost indefinite, the work from home policy, especially in the high technology sector. So this raises two questions, especially, what has happened in cities like New York is that there were these very high-rise office blocks where they're almost empty. So people who were commuting to go to office, suddenly you don't see that much of commuting. But on the other hand, there are neighborhoods in New York where a lot of people live. So they have kind of, transformed and they're doing pretty well. So you are seeing almost, so that's the second question. And first question is, yes, I think commuting, the telecommuting, telework is here to stay. Because once people are used to this kind of life and they can live with it, they're probably not everyone is going to go back to the office. Right? So that raises second issue of, what about cities? Are they going to bounce back? Very big cities. So because of telework, one of the things we are seeing is there is suddenly demand for places away from California or places away from New York. And, for those of us fortunate to be living in a lovely part of Michigan, in the Lansing area, I think, we are very fortunate to be a place where I think, it's pretty open, beautiful spaces. But I hope that, from the preliminary trends, you might expect a little bit of, technology investments especially can become a little bit more even, where people will invest away from those hubs and into smaller regional hubs and so forth. I don't know if Michigan, I don't know if Michigan will benefit from it, but certainly areas like Austin, Denver, I think we are seeing some positive already.
That's a good example of a shift that organizations are experiencing right now. When companies upgrade their processes and systems to accommodate this workforce that's now dispersed, does that lead inevitably to digital transformation?
Yes. I mean, I think these are all part of the same, bigger picture. One is digital transformation can be understood as doing things a little bit differently, enabled by digitization. So yes, part of it is if you're shifting who you are and how you work, that is also digital transformation.
Mhm.
But I think that along with the way that companies, the organizational structure has shifted from everyone being in an office and being monitored for so many hours to now we are being monitored completely based on output, because you can't really measure. Somebody is in a Zoom meeting, but it's not the same as sitting in an office. So more performance. I mean, there's some negative things we are hearing too. One of the things people are saying is that pandemic has been tough for families with small children because childcare type of situations. But the positive side is that suddenly employers are not worried so much about hours or billable hours and things like that, but rather you know how effective are you in your job. So that's already a cultural shift.
Mhm.
And I think it would lead to a more, I'm expecting an increase in creativity and good ideas when people are no longer bound to just, a 9 to 5 schedule and the commuting and so forth.
Let's shift to, I have two more questions for you. One is about the example you gave on the bank that had online and offline synergies. And then we'll end up with a question about the globe, right? Our world that we're living in right now. So regarding online and offline synergies, you gave this example of a bank with a good customer facing interface in an old back office system and how that was mismatched.
Mhm.
If we invited you into an organization, or if you went to an organization to look for a similar weak link such as that, how would you recommend we go about this analysis? Or in other words, what would you look for to identify those weak links?
Well, yeah, I think the weak links actually need some clear metrics. So, when we do this customer conversion, so we look at, for example, if somebody is buying something online and we're looking at the conversion ratios, we have to look for sort of numbers that can tell us, someone's stuck, what proportion of customers have problem finishing that transaction, especially where, and can we do those kind of metrics also by customer segment. So customers of this particular demographic or customers of that age group, are they having specific difficulties finishing some parts of the transaction? So in other words, digitization and digital resilience also means we have to be smart about the numbers. It's not just we have to be number driven, but we have to look at the right numbers to tell us the story, right? And sometimes it's also a question of just, more visualization type tools. So not only we are looking at numbers, but we're looking at trends and patterns and how things are shifting, sort of compare this with what was happening last year. Now we introduced some new digital intervention. So what happens to our conversions or our metrics or some critical success factors? So I think all those, understanding who your customers, where they're coming from, and how they interact with you, but be and sort of very granular. You have to look almost at all the micro steps, and that's like the important aspect.
Thank you. You discussed the digital divide. Do you see a gap in the developing world, such as India and Africa, with the Western world when it comes to digitalization of work practices?
um I would, yeah, I think both yes and no. One aspect, what we oftentimes when we talk about digital divide, we don't realize that, say, in places like India, for instance, people use a lot of smartphones, and a lot of transactions happen through mobile commerce, and that's very different from how things happen, let's say, in more mature e-commerce markets, such as, in the United States. So in India, for example, there is actually something where when you order something on Amazon, a lot of people don't use credit cards, but they can do cash on delivery. E-commerce sites in India have this facility where you're essentially going and ordering stuff through maybe a mobile phone, and then it's delivered to your home and you pay them cash. So this is almost a very different, it's almost very difficult for someone in the United States to imagine these kinds of transactions. So when we talk about digital divide, we usually look at it from our own framework and our own mindset. But it's important also to realize that there can be other methods for digital penetration. And, maybe digital divide operates very differently in other countries. So I would also again say the same thing. You will see a lot of creativity in how retailers have adapted, whether it's online platforms or whoever else in parts of the world, let's say Africa or India. So I think that's your answer to your digital divide.
That just opened up a whole lot more questions I have. I wish we had more time. We have so much to learn from you on this. But we're getting close to the hour, so I wanted to open it up and say, do you have any final thoughts that you would like to share with us as we wrap up today?
Yeah, I think I see a lot of questions in the chat window about what I'm seeing for the future and what are some simple steps a small business owner can do. I would say first, have a digital footprint. Second, at least figure out some digital analytics. So, some digital marketing analytics tools, such as maybe Google Analytics or, YouTube, or it can be Facebook business pages. Facebook also provides a lot of analytics for businesses and so forth. At least learn some of those. That would be a first step into having a digital footprint and digital resilience, because we've seen that that is a very important step.
And what do you see into the future?
I think that this will continue. A lot of what we are seeing is that, COVID has already put pressure on things that have already, underway. The economics of, for example, universities, or economics of medicine, how we deliver services. Those are all, to use the much maligned term, they were ripe for disruption, as a Silicon Valley person would say it. But now we have, this tremendous transformation because of COVID. And I think once we go down this road, when movies are released direct for streaming, when, you can order things online, or you can have these virtual experiences, it's not going to be that easy to go back. Right? Remember that, we used to have birthday parties where everyone would stand around a cake and we would blow on the cake. And then we'll cut pieces and give it to, it's almost unthinkable in the age of COVID. So I would say the same thing for businesses, Are we going back to that candle blowing thing anytime soon? Probably not.
Probably not, correct. Yeah, thank you so much. There's so much to learn from you, and I appreciate your generosity working with us today to develop this webinar and the other work that you do with us in executive development. You've done just an excellent job sharing and piquing curiosity. And if anyone is like me and searching for more information now, I welcome you to reach out to us at MSU. It's what we do. So I want to welcome you to the next few webinars in this series. And at this point, I just wish that you stay healthy and well. Take care. We will see you in a week or so.
Thank you all. Thank you.